Tonight, we're looking at a moment that could change the course of America's future. Because what just happened in Syria isn't just another headline. It isn't just a tragic loss or another foreign skirmish lost in the news cycle. It was a warning, it was a test, and it was a turning point in the fight to defend American lives and American honor. 3 Americans were killed, 2 National Guard soldiers and a civilian interpreter by a Syrian security officer with suspected jihadist ties. And within hours, President Trump launched one of the most aggressive anti-terror operations in recent memory. More than 50 ISIS targets across multiple cities obliterated under Operation Hawkeye strike. If you care about American strength, national security, and the men and women who put their lives on the line for our country, you need to watch this video. Hit the like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because tonight, we're breaking down a moment of reckoning that could reshape America's military strategy, global influence, and the very way we protect our citizens. To understand why Operation Hawkeye strike matters and why it shook the world, you need to see it in historical and strategic context. This wasn't a routine retaliation. This was the culmination of a decade-long struggle against an enemy that was once thought defeated, only to reinvent itself. After ISIS lost its territorial caliphate in Syria and Iraq by the late 2000s, many analysts declared the group defeated. Yet even without territory, the organization never fully disappeared. It morphed, it hid, it waited, and it struck when opportunity arose. For years, US forces have remained in Syria not to occupy, but to prevent a resurgence of terror. Thousands of US troops, along with international coalition partners, including Jordan and members of the Syrian security apparatus, kept pressure on ISIS remnants through coordinated raids, intelligence operations, and precision strikes. This was part of a broader counter-terrorism strategy supported by multiple administrations. Deny ISIS the ability to plan, train, and export terror abroad. That strategy wasn't abstract. It was built on hard-won lessons from Iraq, Afghanistan, and the bloody rise of ISIS in 2014. But on December 13, 2025, the fragile equilibrium shattered. Near the ancient city of Palmyra, a Syrian security officer, allegedly sympathetic to ISIS, opened fire on a joint US-Syrian patrol, killing 2 Iowa National Guard soldiers and a civilian interpreter. This wasn't some faceless battlefield casualty. These were Americans. Sergeant Edgar Brian Torres Tova, 25, remembered for his selflessness and leadership. Sergeant William Nathaniel Howard, 29, a devoted husband, soldier, and man of faith, and their civilian interpreter serving alongside them. Their deaths snapped open a deeper wound, not just strategic, but moral. The United States had endured losses before, but this attack struck at the heart of American sacrifice and the promise that no soldier dies unnoticed. Within days, the US responded, not with token strikes, not with diplomatic protests. More than 70 ISIS targets were struck across central Syria, including infrastructure, weapons storage, and command hubs, in an operation dubbed Operation Hawkeye Strike, named in honor of the Iowa soldiers. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth framed it bluntly. This is not the beginning of a war. It is a declaration of vengeance. President Trump echoed that tone, calling the strikes very serious retaliation and emphasizing that the US hit ISIS very strongly. The sprawling operation used fighter jets like F-15 and A-10, Apache helicopters, and HIMARS rocket systems, with support from Jordanian F-16 as part of the international coalition effort. This wasn't just bombs falling on targets. This was a message launched at full volume. America remembers its fallen. America responds with force, and America will defend its people. The cultural and political stakes could not be higher. In the Middle East and across the world, the image of American power has been in flux for years. After decades of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, many predicted that US global leadership was waning. But Operation Hawkeye Strike reasserted a long-standing principle of American defense policy that when US troops are attacked, the response will be decisive, proportionate, and strategic, not hesitant or symbolic. And that brings us to the deeper geopolitical pattern ISIS attacks are not isolated violence. They are part of a broader resurgence of extremist networks trying to exploit instability. Instability that arises when governments cannot secure territory, when militias infiltrate security forces, and when ideological enemies hide within institutions once thought stable. Here's the central question this moment forces every American to confront. If extremists can disguise themselves as allies, if they can hide inside security forces, how deep does the threat go? That existential tension, ally versus adversary, partner versus predator, is not just a theoretical debate. It's the lived reality forcing US leaders to rethink strategic cooperation, force posture, and national resolve. Understanding this context is essential before we dive deeper into what this means for global strategy, national security, and the future of US military engagement. Stay with me, because the next part of this story connects these strikes to America's role in the world, its duty to protect citizens, and the moral mandate to defend freedom wherever it is threatened. War does not stay where it starts. It moves, it spreads, and eventually it arrives at our doorstep. What happened this week in Syria isn't just a headline. It's a domino falling in a long chain of consequences. Consequences we ignored at our peril. ISIS isn't a distant memory. It's not a topic for dinner table debate. It is a living threat that metastasized when we looked away, hiding in shattered states, exploiting vacuums of power and recruiting not just fighters, but chaos itself. When infrastructure collapses, when families flee, when governance breaks down, systems overload, borders weaken, order unravels. This strike in Syria is not just a military maneuver. It is a homeland security inflection point, a frontier moment in the battle for the soul and safety of this republic. Ask yourself this: when danger breeds abroad, where does it eventually settle? Not just on distant battlefields, but in our ports of entry, our border towns, our neighborhoods. Because what crosses borders is never just people. It is ideology, instability, threat vectors, and ultimately, risk. And ISIS knows this. Cartels know this. The US government knows this. Border officials know this. So the question isn't, did this strike happen? It is, what happens next? To understand why this operation was executed with such force, you must understand the doctrine guiding it. Strength first, negotiation later, deterrence over accommodation, defend first, explain later. The Trump administration did not delay. They did not calibrate their response to political convenience. They responded with immediacy, scale, and intention. Because when Americans are killed, not as collateral damage, but by an infiltrator with extremist ties, the only acceptable answer from our government is force that matters. Political scientists will look back on this moment as classic deterrence theory in action, not just punishing a threat, but warning every other threat watching in silence. Decades earlier, presidents like Reagan and Bush faced similar moments. Reagan in Libya, decisive action to disrupt terror networks. Bush after 9/11, unmistakable retaliation that reset global expectations. Tonight's strikes sit in that company. They are not reactionary, they are strategic. In the hours after the operation, the map of ISIS operations was reshaped. Networks were scattered. Command hubs were dismantled. Infrastructure was destroyed. Regional players are recalibrating. Allies and adversaries alike are reconsidering their positions. And American credibility, questioned by years of strategic ambiguity, is projecting outward again. This is not random. This is purposeful projection of power. But let's be clear about what is at stake here. This is not about partisanship. This is about survival, security, sovereignty, not just of territory abroad, but of the American homeland. On one side of this conflict stands order, a government that remembers its fallen, a nation that responds with resolve, a people who value strength over submission. On the other side stands chaos, dispersed militant networks, ideology unbound, actors who interpret weakness as invitation. This isn't abstract political debate. This is moral urgency meeting strategic reality. Patriots felt it, Republicans felt it, the military community felt it. because this strike was not just a display of force, it was a statement of values. We defend our own, we honor sacrifice, we do not relent. That message is deeply American. It echoes our foundational belief that freedom must be defended, not negotiated into existence. For supporters, this was a defining act of leadership. For critics, it was escalation. And for the families of the fallen, it was justice in action. President Trump stood at Dover Air Force Base with the dignified transfer of the 3 Americans killed. That moment, solemn, somber, unfiltered, speaks to what political strategy cannot manufacture: accountability. This operation was not a press release. It was not a polling tactic. It was a moral response to human loss. And that is what separates real leadership from political posturing. Now, let me ask you directly. Do you think America should strike hard when our people are attacked, or pull back and risk emboldening every adversary watching? Drop your answer in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective. If you believe in security, strength, and national sovereignty, smash the like button. If you stand with the families of the fallen and believe our military deserves unwavering support, subscribe and stay with me. Because this moment, this strike, is not just tactical. It is part of a broader conflict between chaos and order, weakness and strength, complacency and courage. And for America, for patriots defending freedom, that conflict is still unfolding. So stay tuned, because we're only getting to the part where the implications start to hit home. As the dust settles over Syria, the implications of Operation Hawkeye strike extend far beyond the immediate destruction of ISIS infrastructure. This was not merely tactical retribution. It was strategic signaling. Every missile fired, every target neutralized, every intelligence asset leveraged conveyed a simple but powerful message. America remembers. America responds. America does not negotiate with weakness. From a political science perspective, this operation exemplifies classic coercive diplomacy in practice. By combining overwhelming military force with clear moral framing, defending citizens, honoring the fallen, the United States reinforced both deterrence and credibility. As Kenneth Waltz theorized in his work on structural realism, perceived capability underpins influence. Today, the US demonstrated that power remains actionable, not symbolic, but there is a deeper strategic calculus at play. ISIS, radicalized infiltrators, and failed state actors operate in the shadows of chaos. When left unchecked, they metastasize, exporting instability, migration pressures, and ideological contagion to neighboring regions, and eventually to US borders. By striking decisively, the US disrupted not only immediate operational cells, but broader networks of disorder, buying time and space for allies and domestic institutions to prepare and reinforce defenses. Historically, parallels are stark and instructive. Consider Reagan's 1986 airstrikes in Libya, a swift, surgical response to state-sponsored terrorism that recalibrated adversary expectations. Consider Bush post-9/11, decisive action against Al-Qaeda that reshaped global perceptions of American resolve. In each case, the lesson was clear. When the United States acts with clarity and strength, adversaries think twice, and allies take notice. Here, Trump's decision mirrors those precedents, but with an added moral dimension. By personally standing with the families at Dover Air Force Base, he reinforced a critical principle often overlooked in strategic calculus. Legitimacy is not just gained on the battlefield. It is earned in the hearts of citizens and the conscience of the nation. Political authority is strengthened when force is coupled with accountability, empathy, and moral clarity. The consequences are multidimensional. Operational, ISIS networks are fragmented, cells disrupted, and command nodes decimated. Strategic, regional actors, from Syrian factions to Iran and Russia, must recalibrate their calculations against a US that demonstrates both reach and precision. Domestic, Americans witness tangible enforcement of sovereignty and protection, reinforcing trust in governance and national institutions. Yet the lesson is broader than one strike. It underscores a fundamental truth of statecraft. Security is the foundation of liberty. A government that fails to protect its citizens invites both internal instability and external aggression. When safety falters, ideology becomes irrelevant. Voters, citizens, and allies demand competence, clarity, and results. For conservatives, patriots, and strategic thinkers, this is a blueprint for modern governance. Strength must be projected decisively. Moral clarity must accompany tactical action. Credibility is earned not through rhetoric, but through consistent enforcement of principles. And for adversaries, the signal is unmistakable. Violence against Americans carries immediate and consequential costs. Weakness is exploited, strength commands respect. In short, Operation Hawkeye Strike is a case study in strategic statesmanship, demonstrating that the intersection of military might, moral authority, and political accountability is where lasting influence is forged. It is a reminder that history favors nations that act boldly, with purpose, and in defense of fundamental values. The ultimate takeaway for America is clear. Freedom and security are inseparable. Political leaders, elected officials, and citizens alike must recognize that liberty without enforcement is illusion, sovereignty without defense is invitation, and neglect in the face of chaos is a choice with consequences that echo across decades. This is the lesson of Syria, the echo of past crises, and a warning for the future. Nations survive not by passivity, but by decisive action, guided by principle. What happened in Syria is not an isolated strike. It is a signal, a warning, a reminder that the world does not pause, chaos does not wait, and freedom does not defend itself. Evil adapts, war evolves, and when a nation hesitates, threats grow bolder. The lesson is stark. A country that cannot protect its citizens abroad cannot protect them at home. Soldiers, families, and communities are interconnected in the chain of national security. Fail here, and the consequences echo everywhere. This is not abstract theory. This is reality. Strength, duty, honor, sacrifice, these are not political slogans. They are prerequisites for survival, for sovereignty, for a functioning society. Look at history. Reagan faced terrorists in Libya with decisive action. Bush responded after 9/11 with unflinching resolve. Both moments were about more than policy. They were moral declarations. They told the world and told Americans that freedom is defended, not negotiated. Today, the stakes are just as high. America faces enemies who hide in plain sight, who exploit weakness, and who infiltrate allies. Every delay, every compromise, every hesitation is an opportunity for chaos to spread, to destabilize borders, disrupt communities, and threaten families. And this is where the lesson becomes personal. Safety at home is not guaranteed. Neighborhoods, schools, and cities rely on a government willing to enforce law and order. Economic independence cannot thrive in a climate of insecurity. Families deserve policies that create opportunity, not dependency. Sovereignty and borders must be defended. A nation without boundaries is a nation at risk. Accountable governance matters. Leadership is measured by results, not rhetoric. The Syria strike, the response to American lives lost, and the rapid recalibration of global terror networks all illustrate one fundamental truth. Strength commands respect. Weakness invites aggression. For patriots, conservatives, and every citizen who cares about the survival and prosperity of America, the takeaway is urgent. Complacency is a luxury we cannot afford. We must act, politically, culturally, morally, to defend the nation, support those who serve, and uphold the principles that make America exceptional. History is not patient. Lessons ignored abroad arrive at our doorstep at home. Latin America's political upheavals show what happens when citizens are ignored. Syria shows what happens when threats are underestimated. And the United States cannot afford either mistake. The question before us is clear. Will America stand firm in the face of danger, or will it step back, leaving security, liberty, and prosperity to chance? This is a moral and strategic turning point. The choices we make now will define our nation for decades to come. Strength is not optional, action is not negotiable, and freedom is not self-sustaining. If you found this breakdown valuable, don't stop here. This strike in Syria is just one chapter in a much larger story. A story about America's strength, our borders, and the global forces that will shape our future. Click on the next video. Stay informed. Understand the full picture before it's too late. Knowledge is power, and in the coming years, it could be the difference between defending our nation or being caught unprepared. Thank you for watching. I'll see you there.